Water, the most essential resource for life. But what happens when taps run dry? Today we examine reports of water shortages in Russian-controlled cities, the conditions driving them, and what this tells us about the wider impact of war and infrastructure strain. This isn't about sensational claims, it's about facts, context, and what's actually reported on the ground. In some occupied cities in eastern Ukraine, water trickles out for just a few hours every few days. Entire neighborhoods are improvising to survive. Local authorities openly appeal for help, including from Moscow itself. Tonight, we ask, why is this happening? And what does it reflect about Russia's capabilities and challenges in a time of war? In Russian-controlled Donetsk and Mariupol, household taps now deliver water only briefly and irregularly. Residents report discolored or limited flow. Many depend on tanker delivery or manual collection. Officials describe the situation as worsening, with infections rising due to lack of clean water. This is not an isolated anecdote. Multiple outlets, including international news, describe this humanitarian strain on basic utilities in occupied regions. There are multiple factors behind these shortages. First, war-related damage to infrastructure. Bombing and fighting disrupt pumping stations, treatment plants, and network links. Second, historic infrastructure problems. Many systems were already old and worn before the full-scale conflict began. And third, the loss of key canal supplies. Major irrigation and water supply canals that once fed these areas have been disrupted due to shifting control lines. Local engineers describe canal systems operating at a fraction of their needed capacity, with new replacement systems supplying only a portion of the required water. Moscow has responded by dispatching water trucks to drought-hit regions, but these are stopgap measures, not long-term solutions. Meanwhile, local leaders have publicly appealed to the Kremlin for more help, acknowledging the severity of the shortages. This reflects the limits of emergency responses when infrastructure is extensively damaged or outdated. Water shortages are part of a larger picture. War-related damage to critical infrastructure, roads, power grids, water networks has created cascading effects across multiple regions. This is true both in occupied territories and in Ukraine proper, where attacks on energy infrastructure have caused outages in power and water services. Understanding these impacts helps us see how interconnected utilities are, and how war reshapes daily life on many levels. Behind every statistic is a human being. People in affected cities speak of carrying water by hand, waiting in line for deliveries, and watching reservoirs shrink. These are not sensationalized anecdotes, they are documented realities, reported by journalists and local sources on the ground. Water security has become a topic of strategic concern in many conflict zones. Shifts in control of canals, the destruction of infrastructure, and the diversion of engineering resources can reshape access to basic supplies. This is not simply dramatic headline fodderite. It's a reality of prolonged conflict that impacts civilian survival and political leverage. To recap, significant water shortages are documented in Russian-controlled cities. These shortages stem from war damage, aging systems, and disrupted supply lines. Authorities have attempted emergency relief, but long-term fixes remain elusive, and water security in wartime is a complex challenge with real humanitarian effects. No single phrase tells the full story. Instead, these developments reveal the real-world consequences of prolonged conflict on everyday life. In our next episode, we'll look at how critical infrastructure becomes a battleground not just for bullets, but for energy, food, and survival itself. Hit subscribe and click the bell to stay informed, where we break down the world's toughest struggles with clarity and context.